Our featured guest today has characterized big data services firms as the invisible giants of the markets. But what's next for these names as investors fear that artificial intelligence can disrupt all those business models? Joining us now to discuss is Ram Sampath, VP for Portfolio Research with TD Asset Management. Great to have you back on the show.
Good to be back, Greg.
All right, Leslie, we're going to do some catch-up now. The last time we had you on the show, we were talking about this invisible giants as a key part of the market, information services companies. Let's talk about some of the challenges now being presented by AI.
Are they called as invisible giants? I think they're more so invisible ghosts, I think, at this point of time. If you think about what's happened over the last 6 months, the stocks are down around 45%. And in the last 3 months, year to date, they're down around 25%. And part of the biggest reason is AI. So AI has kind of started to disrupt the space in different ways. And the reason why is that these invisible giants, which we called before, had a lot of data. And what AI does best is summarize and analyze data as much as they can. So we thought that these were going to be winners because you had a lot of data. You can just input something on top of your data and give a more precise and fast and accurate result. But turns out that's not the case. People are looking at Pareto's rule, for example. So they're willing to get 80% of the answer at 20% of the time, and they're willing to sacrifice that 20% of an answer which might be wrong. And so you have all of this public data, which is again not 100 years old, which might be 5 years old, and things are changing very quickly. And that is part of the reason why these stocks have been underperforming.
Let's talk about the pace of AI development. I think when people were first able to access this technology, a year or two back on their phone, they weren't that impressed. They were getting a lot of wrong answers. They thought, this isn't going to play out. But things are changing pretty quick.
It is. If you go back 2 years, you can systematically think about what you would be querying AI, right? So what I'd at least say what I was doing, I said, AI, hey, write me a good story which I can read for the next 10 minutes. Write me a poem or something like that, or tell me a joke, right? Things are changing. Now students are using AI for them to analyze information and give them a summary of complex math which they're not able to understand, or complex physics. Like AI is able to break that down, right? The other part is I'm going on vacation soon. So I asked AI, can you plan a trip to Spain and Portugal? And then it actually gave me a really, really good summary. And then I decided, wow, it's actually able to plan better than I would have planned by doing 10 Google searches, right? So things are changing very, very quickly. And the way it has gone is it was at this wow phase last 2 years ago, and now it's kind of become an everyday phase. I cannot live without doing AI. That comes back to the point when I think about Google Maps or GPS, right? People were using GPS at one point, and then when Google Maps took over, people started using Google Maps, and they're like, wow, it can actually come on a smartphone. Now I don't need to have this massive GPS device for me to go from one place to another. And then 2-3 years later, it just became an everyday sensation, right? So no one really talked about it. So right now we are in this everyday phase. Everyone is digesting AI on a daily basis. And I think there's more room to go in terms of improvement.
The last GPS system that was stolen out of my car was around the same time that I just realized I had it on my phone, and I don't need to keep giving the criminals a GPS for them to lift out of my car. So things have moved pretty quick. And like you said, I do the same thing all the time. I just pick up my phone, get the map going, throw the phone there, drive along. So this is going to leave some companies exposed. Which ones are most exposed?
So again, I think you spoke about necessity being the mother of invention. Innovation is key here. If you have data, you thought you were king before, but you're not the kingmaker anymore, right? So just having the data doesn't give you the right to win in this game. Having a workflow makes you the right to win, right? So the ones which are at risk at the top level are the ones who are not innovating, just have the data, and just have like an AI layer on top of it. And basically, if you query, it will give you an answer. It will not give you a holistic point of view. And you won't have a research assistant helping you to understand and assimilate information faster than they can. So those are the companies which are poised to lose in the long frame. But in general, if you have a workflow, if you have like a complete algorithm, if you have a research assistant who's telling you, maybe that is not the right way to think about this, I think those are the stocks which are expected to benefit the most.
All right, let's talk about some of those companies that are better positioned in this environment. The other ones had data, maybe a little AI layer laying on top of it. Who can actually take advantage of this moment?
Correct. So there are two ways to think about this. So let's think about, let's say, Thomson, for instance, right? So they have this massive 150-year legal database, which is really important. It has access to a multitude of cases which have been either won or lost. It tells you what sort of case has been won based on which argument, etc. So those are expected to benefit only if you have like a good layer on top of it. The reason why I say it is because as much as you know whatever cases have been won, you need someone to tell you, okay, these cases have been won because of the arguments which have been made, and the draft has to be proper, right? So if you have a co-counsel or an assistant assisting you, you will probably benefit the most. The reason why I say Thomson is legal is very finicky. You cannot come up with a wrong argument in court. You could potentially get disbarred. Same thing with accounting too, right? So if you're filing for taxes, if you have AI file the wrong taxes or submit the wrong forms, then there's obviously IRS going to knock at the door, right? CRA going to knock at the door and say, you actually evaded taxes. So things where the moat is more defensible, where you cannot go wrong. When I said last time 80-20,
Yeah, I'm not willing to risk a 20% error rate on my
100%.
taxes.
I would rather pay the
legal
extra
defense,
incremental $100 to make sure that I don't get jailed or whatever, right? So those are the things. The other, you also have to take into consideration the software part of the market, right? So can we move away from something like an Excel, a Word? It's so ingrained in your work system that it's very, 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 very hard to displace something like a Microsoft, right? All they're doing is they're incrementally giving more products. So think of it like your mobile phone, your touch phones when it came out in 2008 or 9. The way you would think about it is more and more apps become compatible. And so as more apps become compatible, Microsoft kind of becomes like a major player here.
Okay, so we put all that together. How should investors be thinking about the space right now?
When we are thinking about AI, let's not just purely think about AI as being disrupting these companies completely, right? Whenever there is a shift in technology, things are not very fast. Things go down at a slow pace. AI should also be viewed as something very similar. The reason I say that is, yes, it has encroached into your day-to-day activities as of where we are today. But you go back in history, right? Streaming didn't change, people going to movies. If you think about Amazon, like online retail was the biggest change which everyone had. Like something could be delivered at your doorstep, but people still visited malls or went to the grocery store. That still happened. Technology is changing, but the pace at which things are changing are quick. But eventually, things will take over. The one thing for you to understand within AI is it disrupting the flow of work today? If it is, then that's a company which you don't want to be associated with. If it's not disrupting today, look at the second and third degree. Can it happen over the next 10 to 15 years? Then answer the question and say, okay, this is going to be a slow bleed, but there is a moat for the next 10, 15 years.